Um, let's see if I can explain this because I barely understand it, which is if you have a bunch of stuff and you want to find something in that stuff, how do you find it, right?
Mhm.
Pretty decent problem, you know. Thankfully, you know, in our real lives, we might have it hidden under a book or, you know, whatever. Like we're always looking for stuff, but how do you find things? Well,
Oh, hello, Mike. Happy Wednesday or Tuesday?
I think it's Wednesday, Jack,
Wednesday. Oh,
and
okay.
good to be back. We had a break and most of it was not productive because I was sick, and we were just talking about that. But you know, for the
Mm,
purposes of our show, welcome to the
mm,
show. I do have a question actually
mm.
for you, and I thought it's going to be difficult to teach me anything because you know me, right? I mean, I'll just
Well, we are both, kind of, sometimes not the sharpest knives in the drawer, but we are trying to we are trying to
try.
get better, right?
I think so. I mean, that's a good sentiment. I'm certainly in the class. I think just to let you know, catch you up. The story so far is I'm having them read about the fallibility of certainty, I guess, right? The idea that, you know, we're pretty easily fooled and there's a lot of things we think are really certain, but they're really not. And it's this whole idea of just coming around to you know, what is trustability and what is truths and lies. And anyway, and the reason I
Mhm,
started the class this way is because the fun thing about LLMs, as we'll get into in a second, right, is that they'll
mhm,
easily lie, right? Like they're not going to not come up with something.
mhm.
However, it strains our abilities, right? Because if we don't know something, it's very hard to know truth from lies, right? You know, and I think the early days it was funny because the goal of today is for me to learn a little bit about math. It's
Mhm.
always tough, right? But in the early days, remember how LLMs they kept throwing like couldn't add numbers together. Remember all that fun, you know?
Mhm.
And I think both of us at the time were like, well, it's a large language model, right? It's not a calculator. And I don't know if you have any insight. I mean, I'm assuming they just have models now that are more calculator-esque and they just use those whenever they get into trouble. I don't know. I don't know what it does, to be quite honest.
Kind of. So,
Okay. So
so
they kind of
it's
bolted something on, is what I mean. Like it wasn't inherent that it would
yeah,
know math.
they bolted some math capabilities. I mean, it's exactly like with the human brain, right? And you remember, how much is, 7 times 7, right? But
True.
it's not like you are calculating it, right? It's not like your brain, opens a notepad and kind of does a calculation, oh, here's a 7 times 7, right? So you remember that, and the same thing. So it was not lies, right? It was just that in the vast ocean of probabilities, this huge soup that the LLM remembers, right? Can recall, right? It would just come up with an answer, that was kind of the closest to what it kind of got from you, right? So if it had, like if there is like 10 million posts in Reddit, or whatever, or Twitter or something that says that, 7 times 7 is, 100, right? Then it's going to try
Typical
to
Reddit.
get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to try to get you that number, right? So it's not gonna. So it's only relies on the fact that, the majority of people would say that it's 49, then that's why, right? So the things are improving because now they are changing the architecture. So in the front of the LLM, they would
Hmm.
put an agent. So the
Hmm.
LLM may not have an answer that 7 times 7 is 49. It may not be 100% certain, but it will be 100% certain in the fact that there's a math question coming in, right? So
Hmm.
it's going to trigger an agent that is going to maybe point to something specialized, like there's going to be a Python code that's going to, generate 7 times 7, and that code is going to be, correct, right? Or maybe there's going to be like Mathematica, Stephen Wolfram's, plugin that is going to get you an answer that is going to be very, very likely to be correct, right? So that's what has changed, but the ocean of probability is still growing, and maybe the streams of those probabilities are better, but still, there is a chance that, that kind of stuff might be recalled incorrectly.
Great explanation, because I will say today it was kind of funny. I'm reading a little bit from the gripe professors. It's a Reddit thread where they gripe about AI a lot. Um, and somebody sort of threw out something like, well, that R is available for free on the internet. And that was the statement, right? And then somebody's like, is this pirate talk? Like, R. Yeah, anyway, and I just thought that was hilarious, because not that it's hilarious for most, but R to me is the most torturous thing I've ever had to deal with in life, right? Like R is really good at correlation and so on and so forth, and but yeah, it is its own world by far, right? And I'm sure it's surpassed by some other even more complex things. But guess what? I find that the LLMs can probably manage R just fine. And the math that we're going to get into is the two things I discovered, and maybe I'm going off on a tangent again, because we just talked about statistical relevance, right? Like that is something we taught computers how to calculate, right? And there are methods, just as there are methods for everything. But at a base level, we taught this how to be encoded into ones and zeros, and then go into registers and be manipulated. You see what I mean? Like it's insanely abstract what we got computers to do in the first place, right? So the idea of accuracy is interesting, because it's supposed to never, well, you can do the how line, right? I was never going to be able to misplaced data, or I don't know. It has a manifesto. I wish I could remember it, right? Hal is like, we have never, something about being faithful to data. I guess that's the point. When they interview Hal, like, oh, those 8,000 sucked, but the 9,000s, we're the best. So it's the interesting, like the more meta aware these things are, I guess, the farther you get away from like, oh, are you calculating properly? And I guess the two things that I learned, and the thing I want to apply it to, might be related, because guess what? It's always comes up, is called MCMC. That should warm the cockles of your heart that Markov comes in again, because if you have a Monte Carlo simulation and with Markov involved, apparently that was the secret sauce. Okay, so little did I know that maybe my least favorite thing is Monte Carlo simulators, right? And let's see if I can explain this, because I barely understand it, which is, if you have a bunch of stuff and you want to find something in that stuff, how do you find it, right? Pretty decent problem, thankfully, in our real lives, we might have it hidden under a book, or whatever. Like, we're always looking for stuff, but how do you find things? Well, the obvious answer is to go through everything, right? Or I guess in human terms, you're like, well, where did you last see it? Or something like that. You're trying to remember something vaguely, to locate something in real life, and it happens all the time. And unless things are extremely well formatted, you won't know. So here's math to the rescue. Well, just look at the one thing, it's not there. Look at the next thing, it's not there. So that's Monte Carlo, right? It's just going to pick something at random. And the problem is that it's going to pretty much spend most of its time in the places that it isn't at.
No.
Okay. So that's kind of a problem, but computers are dumb, and they don't, you can just have them work on something forever, right? I guess, it's not like costly to do needle in a haystack, but it's time consuming. And I guess, considering, right, that once it finds it, though, it's like, there you go. You really don't know, other than the fact that it just kind of guessed, of why it's there. Well, then you get Markov, right? So Markov is like, no, I can't just go anywhere. I have to wander around. And the fun analogy was, it's like some drunk person climbing mountains is basically the idea. It's like, hey, I found a mountain. And so the problem with Markov is, like, once you found the mountain, you might not find that there's another mountain, right next to it. You're like, I'm perfectly happy in this mountain. So apparently MCMC is this great idea that you combine both of them And that's where it
Mm,
kind of loses me. But apparently, this concept is extremely important to our attention mechanisms, not necessarily like the softmax thing, which is another
mm,
problem. But this attention mechanism and weighting is, it doesn't look at all possibilities, right? Like if it's going through something, that would just take forever. And
mm,
honestly, it probably wouldn't find anything. So it's got
mm,
to use this technique, which led me to my other thing that I didn't understand, but it keeps get mentioning so much, is called inner products or dot products. So
mm.
dot products are probably more like, oh yeah, old hat to mathematicians. I just kept wondering why they kept getting mentioned all the time.
Mm.
So I don't know if either of those two basic math ideas uh, spark anything that you want to share with me as your hopefully willing student.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is kind of this is very cool. But it's kind of going against what we do with AI today. And the,
Hmm.
the the paper that you sent me a few days ago about
Yeah.
controlling the error in the simulation, it's kind of that's the other thing, right? So if we don't have the today's AI, then the randomization through Monte Carlo is kind of making a lot of sense, but
Hmm.
it's making a lot of sense kind of in a controlled situation, right? Like it doesn't. So if you have a kind of like a high entropy environment where a lot of things can change, right? Like just imagine maybe your room, right? And you dropped your laundry on the floor, right? And then you would like to kind of, okay, so it's a high entropy situation that all those pieces can be anywhere, and if you kick them, right, then it's kind of like a high entropy, right? So the stuff can be anywhere, right?
Right.
So Monte Carlo in that kind of a situation, it's really not helping you because it really, I mean, what you may get, like a something, like a dirty shirt, or a dirty
It'll
t-shirt,
find one
here
sock,
or
which
there.
isn't that
Yeah,
helpful, right?
yeah,
Like,
that's not that helpful. But if you have like a controlled situations, like I use
hmm.
Monte Carlo for example in a statistical mechanics problem where you have a channel. So just imagine just a short pipe, and then there's a few molecules in that short pipe, and you would like to use figure out like what are the possible configurations of those molecules. So let's say you have three molecules, and then you have like a short pipe, right? Then
Hmm.
Monte Carlo is very useful because it's not like there is like a million of those molecules, and it's not like there is the channel is like a 10 miles long, right? So
Hmm.
so now you can kind of start randomizing things, and you can do like millions and millions of those randomizations, and you can see the patterns maybe emerging because you have very
Hmm.
few things, right? So it's a kind of low entropy situation, right? Like if your if your laundry is kind of in the drawers, it's a low entropy situation. If you're because the laundry is in the drawers, you can kind of mix them in the drawer, but not all over the room, right? If the laundry is all over the room, it's a high entropy problem, right? And
Hmm.
it's a totally different world, right? So then okay, so that's great, right? So Monte Carlo is useful in some situations where you want to see patterns like where things are. And then, Markov comes in and kind of like, it basically counts those patterns, right? So if in your simulation, molecule number one is always next to molecule number two, you can use the Markov model to actually
Hmm.
count those relationships. So then you will know that, okay, one and two are together. So that's a higher probability situation than, let's say, one and three, which maybe are less frequently together.
Hmm.
Right. So Markov comes in, after the randomized Monte Carlo, and will start counting the states, and will give you a model. Oh, those two will be together. Those, and then kind of, and then it creates basically like a grammar, right? Okay. So if my molecule number one is here, then I can count on molecule number two being there, with a probability of, let's say, 60%. So it creates me a behavioral model which can be applied to robots, like what the robot would do, or what the people, like what people would write, like in most
Hmm.
cases, in the email, you will say, hello, Mike, right? So that's a Markov, relationship that you can capture. So yeah, so that's great. So it's a purely statistical way to capture a model of something. And, and if your Monte Carlo did a great job, right, kind of randomizing, and you did a lot of those randomizations, and you are in a relatively controlled environment, then your Markov is going to be great, because then the Markov gives you basically the behavioral model of what's going on.
Well, I mean, I'm learning a little bit now. Now in these methods, you're saying it's a little bit old fashioned, right? In this paper, what we're talking about, I think it's interesting because it's talking about very measurable things. So when you talk about entropy, like it doesn't seem like these are high entropy problems, but the problem they're trying to solve is sort of an entropy, well, not an entropy related problem. What they're trying to say is that you just pick the wrong model, right? Like if you pick the wrong model, you'll still get an answer, but you won't know that you picked the wrong model, I guess. And to me, I find that really fascinating. They're trying to come up with a way to like, well, how do you know? And that's exactly what we're tackling in class, right? Like, how do you know that the conclusions that it's coming to are reasonable, especially ones that are pretty qualitative in nature, right? Because qualitative things aren't a sock or I don't know what they're talking. I think they talk a lot about nuclear weapons here. Was kind of the whole point of this was like, how do you know if you don't test your weapons if they work or not, right? Like, so they're trying to say like, well, you can run tests, you can do whatever science is, right? We can do science, but there's still um, accuracy problem because we don't know, I guess, of where the errors are. Where is the entropy going to slip itself in? Which actually seems more like our friend LLMs, right? That they're sort of embracing the fact that you need this noise, you need these errors in order to function at all. But
Yeah.
I could be taking it a bit far.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's that those are very good examples. So if we are talking about like big bumps, right? It's the only way to kind of test it is to make a big bang, right? Otherwise, you have a simulation and you don't know if the simulation is really kind of accurate unless you do a big bang, right?
Hmm.
For things like self-driving cars, you have a model and you can let the car kind of on the street, right, and see what happens, right? And that's maybe a little bit still high cost, like what's happening sometimes, with the self-driving cars nowadays. There was a famous or infamous case a couple of months ago where one of the self-driving taxi cabs actually, you know, um, went past the bus stopping, with the stop sign,
Oh,
and injured the kid, right? And that was a really, really bad situation, and that there was some
oh yeah. Oh
special.
God, the outliers are going to be very
Yes,
horrific, right?
yeah, and there was some mitigating circumstances, but still the self-driving
Mhm.
cars went past the stopped, school bus, and injured the kid. But then the whole thing is now, right in the center of the medical research, right? Like, hey,
Mm.
we're gonna generate a new pill, and we don't want to test it on mice, for 3 months or 6 months or whatever. We want to test this compound, within the AI, run, like, 10 minutes of simulations, and we want to know that the simulation comes up with exactly the same answers as if, we would give the same drug to a monkey or a mice, or a rat, right? So in the lab. So that's exactly what's going on. We want, in that paper that you mentioned, right? How do we kind of reconcile the simulation, that is run by the AI with the simulation that would occur in the real time, right? So now we are learning not so much now the new stuff from training the LLMs to kind of learn new stuff, but we are trying to get the LLMs to learn actually the simulations, right?
Mm.
So train the LLM on the simulated, what happened to the mice if you give them, like aspirin, right? Like what are the
Yeah.
vitals or everything, what's kind of like blood work, of a mouse, after getting a compound, right? And then teaching the
It
LLM.
just sounds like R is involved, right? I mean, we are
Yeah,
talking.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, and then, so you basically have an annotated simulation with an outcome, and then you are training the LLM to kind of do the same on virtual. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh, no. And
yeah.
that's what I'm trying to do, right? Is I want to mix qualitative and quantitative and let the LLM do all the hard work of how would it prove any sort of confluence or dissonance or anything, right? And I want it to be continuously updated, which is really what I'm hoping for, that you get, in a sense, a story, but it's a evolving story, right? Because most decisions, and let me just share, because I think you know how much you like diagrams, and I thought this appealed to you, right?
Mhm.
This looks like a jack diagram. That's why I sent it to you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a jack diagram because it's very big picture, which I also
Mm.
appreciate, right? You know, this is this idea that there's such a thing called knowledge, right? Which leads to decision, but this is true. I mean, this is exactly what I'm trying to model right now in the class, right? Is can you build this thing? Now, I am not, and maybe this is something we talk about a lot, the physical reality world or universe, right, is not part of this. You know, let's hope, because the universe, there is no large universe model, right, or large reality model.
Not yet, right? But people are
Ah,
definitely working on
you,
that.
you, Mr. Sci-Fi, you know,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
world's complicated, man. You know, okay, but you're right. Maybe, well, actually, did anyone ever attempt that? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for decades there was a branch of AI that was
Hmm.
working on they called it naive physics. Like kind of making the AIs understand that if you have a glass in your hand and you drop it
Hmm.
on the floor, the glass will break, right? But if you have something made of, I don't know, metal, right? You drop it on the floor, it's not gonna break. So they were working on
Oh
those
my God.
world models, yeah.
Hopefully they were well funded and are happily, because that seems like it would take forever. And
Yeah,
what a
they were,
terrible
yeah.
thing to model, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not even a taxonomy, is it?
Yeah, well, they were putting that into a logical system. So they were building those
Well,
logical
right, because then
rules.
you'd have to
Yeah,
do operators. Anyway,
yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah. So that was the Douglas Leonard, and his psych project, CYC.Inc., right? So he spent 20, 30 years. As long as I
yeah.
remember being undergrad, they were there, and then, after I graduated, they were there. So multi-decade project.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I have a big soft spot for this because I come from art, right? And we do the same thing, right? We get involved in some crazy idea for 20, 30 years, you know, and there's some output from it, and then a lot of people are puzzled or confused, but you know, that's all fine, right? Why not? You know, that's a good life. Good idea. I think this well, the paper itself to me is just I like this uh well, you know, I like the idea of how do things fit together, right? You know, this do you know, and I'm struggling with this, but I use the paper, of course, to ask for this to be broken down into more a methodology that an LLM could handle for me or a RAG could handle for me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so let's go back because yeah, there you go. So I'm
So,
trying
so,
to
so,
teach
Mike, so,
RAG to have this. Oh,
mm.
yeah.
so, Mike, if you could go back, for a second back to
Oh,
this
yeah,
to this
sure.
image. So the way this is being done right now is that this bubble that shows um, the universe of physical reality. So what is being done right now is that, for example, in manufacturing, right? Like, for example, imagine a company that is, like making jeans, like sewing things, right, together, stitching them together, right? So they are putting cameras, on kind of like on headbands, that the employees basically kind of wear during the tasks. So if somebody is kind of running some stitch, on making jeans or whatever, the AIs will have a very detailed tons and tons of examples of very detailed videos like how things are done, right? So that's the so that's this bubble, that's the data set that's going to be now, and that data set will have to be digested by the AI. So it has to be made ready, right? Because AI ready, because the AI, I mean, a video is not an AI data set, so
Oh yeah,
how do
right.
we do this, right? So the one way to do this is kind of like in motion capture what you do, right? Like you try to model each finger, like how it moves, given the context, right? So the observations, the bubble that are the observations will be kind of like basically named entity recognition, right? Oh, here's my finger, number one, finger number two, and they are moving,
Mm-hmm.
in a certain way, right? So now when I figure out the movement, then I can kind of ask the AI to kind of give me those vectors and create like a model of the movement, right?
Mm.
So this is kind of moving towards the green bubble where the video will be converted basically into a model of the movements in the context of, oh, I'm making jeans or I'm making t-shirts or I'm making shirts. So this will be kind of the workflow here.
No, that's well, so that I think that fits into kind of where I'm challenged. Okay, so we're in week three, and I just processed my week three results, and what I started to notice, and this is the thing, is that I don't personally want to read. So the goal of the weekly assessment is how's the class going, and there's a 3 point scale, right? It's going bad, it's going okay, or it's great, whatever. So
Mhm.
easy, at least I think, right, to see if there's any real shifts because I don't like Likert scales. Whatever.
Mhm.
And then like anything interesting, or problematic this week is the second question. It's open text. Okay, so there we've got qual quant, right? And the goal is for me not to read them. And I want them just to be processed. And what I want to see from each week is has anything changed, right? And basically I want you to develop a story about how people are reacting to the course. And I do have it tied to the syllabus a little bit so that there is a progression concept. And again, these are just use the syllabus. Like I don't know exactly what the mathematical models or whatever, what it's doing when I use such vague terms. So what I found is I need to be a little less vague, you know.
Mhm.
And using this, I said, can you come up with a better um, model using these ideas? Like I certainly get out of my depth pretty much instantly, right, with what's going on in this paper. But I like the idea, which is that anytime you have a bunch of noise or like you said, entropy or something like that, or inaccuracy, it's like, what do you do? Can you just ignore it, right? Which is probably good technique, but it'd be nice to see if you could recognize it. And I'm doing it qualitatively because I start to read the things, and what happens is that outliers get surfaced much higher than they should, if that makes sense, right? Consensus
Mhm.
is not bad, right? So consensus, or let's just consider it like the one shot, right? Like, hey, I can find a good summary of this, right? I can pick
Mhm.
that out easily. What I'm finding it has a hard time with is dissonance, right? Because any dissonance, if you ask for it, it'll find. So you kind of see
Mhm.
where, the fun of this exploration is that I have no idea how to do this, right? Like kind of making it up, and then I'm having them do it because I'm, figuring, hey, well, I'll try it out, right? Like the hope is that complete failure is not a bad idea because, well, yeah, you've got LLMs now, right? Like you won't be left with nothing, right? That's probably everyone's fear going into very complex analysis, right? I need a 1 year grant to figure out if um, cigars are better than pipe tobacco, and
Mhm.
then you end up with some results that are middling, which is a situation I shared with them just recently because they did this big survey of faculty at Northwestern, sent it to me, and it says, here's a thing of non-tenure track faculty, right? Here's the state of their feelings about life and in general, and it's one of those big multivariate horrible surveys that mean nothing, but they spend a lot of money on them, right? And
Mm.
you could probably guess the two sort of confluences, right? The things that are easy to get you. I mean, you want to guess what they both were as the big complaints?
I don't know. Salary in the right.
Basically, you're right. Salary and time. It's the same. And like again, what in the world could it be other than
Mm.
that, right? And even that isn't a huge out, like 100%, right?
Yeah.
And to me, these expensive surveys, and I was going to say my students even pointed out to the thing I missed is that I am not in this survey. In fact, they only surveyed what could be considered full-time faculty that aren't in any of the actual roles, traditional university roles, right? So
Mhm.
adjuncts weren't even included. Adjuncts we're just cannon fodder, right? So
Yeah.
whatever. So that was to me interesting because I assumed when I read that line and didn't read anything else and then went straight into the results that I was included. And that was what's interesting. I mean, that's what's interesting of why we're doing this as more of a design project, right? Because the story that you tell has all these human aspects, right? I mean, we're easily into the realm of humans, which if you went back to the thing, right? It's like, well, did you get any knowledge out of any of this? Well, of course you did, because you'll make it up, right? I mean, you'll either have your idea confirmed or you'll whatever you do, you won't learn anything, is I guess the point
Mm.
from these things, right? Because there's always going to be equivocation. And that's why I'm trying to get them to say, well, what if you just instead took all of that data and you told a story?
Mm.
And then what you did is you use that to decide something, do it, and then get data again and
Mm.
see if it actually changed the story in the manner you wanted. Basically, I'm trying to develop this sort of feedback engine idea, right? Because things are hard, but I do think we have the beginnings of this, in
Mm.
terms of being able to get mass, right now we've got poly markets or something, right? Like, and quick tangent. Do you have any thoughts on poly markets?
Mm, not really. Not
Okay,
really.
because you're not betting on your sports team or
Mm,
whatever.
it's a bigger topic. I mean, we could probably kind of talk
We
about
could do
this
we
in
could do poly markets. The reason I
separate.
brought it up
Yeah.
is its predictive value is a little overstated, but I do think that it is statistically interesting, right?
Mm.
Because when you have stake in the game, right, which is the point, like you have a belief that you are willing to put up a couple bucks. I don't know how. Apparently, people put up money or something, and someone gets on the other side of this. Um, that that is interesting in itself, right? It's an interesting data point because I do the
Mm.
same with Reddit. Like I know everyone on Earth is not participating in this Reddit thread, but it does seem to always represent a pretty decent, depending on the topic, right? Pretty decent spread of
Mm.
opinions, and also that people's opinions sort of are naturally going to be additive, right? They don't want to say like, I agree with you. Oh, I agree with you too. You see what I mean? Like
Mm. Mm.
that's not the way discussions work. And so you got two ways of sort of getting quick feedback on some topic. And which leads me to think that companies should just put in all of their 2027 plans into Polymarket and see who bets on them. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
why not? Right? Like, it's not a bad use of money to see which of these actually resonate with people. Remember vaporware?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, right.
But
Like, what
yeah.
should you spend your time on? I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to please customers, maybe that's a good thing. Sorry, that was a lot. What were you going to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason maybe I wanted to kind of maybe separate the poly market discussion from our, let's say survey discussions is that there is other tools that are appropriate. I mean, it's not like statistics can capture, let's say market behavior. So like in that in that bucket, markets, in game theory come into play, which captures other relationships, for example. But going back to your survey, right, and storytelling, I think that, having AI now available to us kind of gives us now an ability to do storytelling like this. People say, oh, prescriptive analysis, right? But the storytelling, right,
Yeah.
even from a terrible instrument, because let's say that there was some really bad questions, like in the survey, like maybe, do you like donuts, for example, or something, right? But then, if AI starts looking at the subpopulations, what people answered, about donuts, for example, and
Right.
then, the salary, to your point, right, or hours, right? Then you can start, kind of simulating, not through Monte Carlo, not the random, but kind of simulating the subpopulations, and then you can come up with interesting, like, let's say, statistical lifts concepts, because maybe, if people who are more into donuts, are maybe less concerned about their salaries, because maybe they like donuts, and that's kind of like soothing their life, something, right? So there might be a lift. So maybe free donuts, right, would solve the problem, that surfaced in the survey for the institution, because if there's free donuts given to the faculty, they will complain less about everything else, right? So these kind of things can be now possible through the simulation process that focuses on subpopulation lifts, between certain, elements of that are important, right? So that is kind of like a tool that is available now.
Well, I think what you're saying is also exactly where I'm going, which is that the day to day, right? We complain
Mm,
about the weather and tax. You see what I mean? Like these are the same things Polymarket is good at.
mhm,
They're I guess the word is describable and achievable, right? Like that's
mhm,
rare. Most things are a continuum, right? They don't, they just go up and down, right? And to focus more on the donuts is exactly where I want this tool to be
mhm,
because because the macro things are distracting. You know what I mean? Like we're not economists, right? And the work we do with this is probably going to be clumsy at best, considering, I guess, still in the United States, I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, that salary transparency is like non-existent or something. You know what I mean? Like everyone
mhm,
imagines everyone's worse off, and weirdly, when you find out that it's true, you're, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you get, this always shocks me. Like, wow, you should be much better
mhm,
off, is usually my thought, right? Like, if you're making, or that's the problem, right? Is that it's all extremely relative. We're always amazed by our neighbors who apparently for every single meal get DoorDash. And we're just like, how insane can that be economically, if you know what I mean, right?
mhm.
That that this convenience, becomes a lifestyle. And
Yeah.
and therefore your need to make more money is kind of baked in. Um, right? Like that's the thing, is
Mhm,
the choices that you make are baked into these long-term, sometimes terrible ideas. Our friend now who just lost her job. She moved to LA, I guess, a couple years ago for a big position at a college, came out, was laid off, and I think her entire department was dissolved because things are not going well in higher education in the arts, which is a shame because we love higher ed art education. But anyway, so she's just like, well, I can't live here because my mortgage is $6,000 a month, and so it's interesting to just hear like, oh yeah, that's a chunk of change, right? Like that's
mhm.
got to come from someplace. And so the decisions that we make at the time were like, oh, I make X amount of money, I can easily, you know what I'm saying? Like I can afford X
Mm.
until you can't. So long story short, decision making, where was I saying? Knowledge, decision. Remember that part of the graph. That's where I want to see if can you make the decision and then have it feed back. Because in her situation and in many situations, like you can't just sell your house and move, although she has 4 times, right? But now she's like, wants to move back to Chicago. I'm like, well, that's yet another decision that has also, it doesn't stop there, right? Like I'm lucky to be in the same place for quite a while, as are you, right? Like,
Mm,
well, the decision I made back then seems tenable because it is equip, I guess, right? Like it seems to be working out, right? Whereas if you had to redecide, come live in Oak Park near me because we needed to see each other more often and enjoy cigars and pipes and stuff. But you
mm,
see what I mean? That decision has a whole bunch of other feedback mechanics, that go with it. So I'm starting to say is, hey, here's a ton of data that we could hopefully capture. So back to this mechanic, right? You can capture it qualitatively and quantitatively from all sorts of things. Like you could probably easily tap into sort of slow moving data sets like price, crime price, neighborhood, whatever. You can get all these things sucked into your LLM system and then tell this story. Chicago is a great place to live if you like cigars and pipes.
mm,
And weirdly, I guess my problem and why I'm trying for the math, I haven't talked a lot about math. I'm trying to do the math of like, well, how do I trust it? Because it just so happens this one guy talks incessantly about how great it is to smoke cigars, but that isn't true of the whole population, but the signal of it is so prominent that the LLM promotes it. You see what I mean? Like it gets fooled, and I want it to be more skeptical or something. You see what I mean? I'm trying to build in some mechanic where it can be like, don't change the story unless something really does happen. And that is, the monthly get together for cigars club
mm.
hosts its meeting and 500 people show up every time for the cigar night. You see what I mean? And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that is significant. Boy, do people like cigars and pipes here in Oak Park. Great. That is in decision making. I can say like, okay, now I'm going to go there and expect to bring my humidor or something.
Yeah.
Like so it's this predicting the future thing that I'm trying to get at. Like you're always acting in certain ways, and you're sometimes you just don't get lucky, right? Like, hey, wait, I don't see any cigar friendly places at all. This place has lied to me.
Mm.
And it's like, well, not really, but it doesn't know how to, it doesn't know how this part works. And again, I'm overfitting it to this paper, right? Like
Mm.
because I feel like it's trying to do a little bit of the same thing. Like, how do you know how good it is at doing this thing of building knowledge? And I think it goes back to you because aren't you trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, right, the example that you are describing is extremely high entropy, right? Like the all the economic kind of economy driven situations are extremely high dimensional problem, right? Like I'm gonna go to LA, right, and get a great job, and how long is it gonna last? That lasting effect depends on so many other things in the economy, like the fact that AI is now kind of like influencing higher education and entry-level jobs and so many other things. Like so now so we have so it's even worse than that because we are no longer even in the field of economic research. We not even have a model that is capturing the post-labor economy that people begin to talk about, right? We have things that kind of we have Keynes, right? We have Austrian School of Economy. We have Chicago School of Economy, right? We have Oscar Lange and von Hayek, and Keynes, and all contradictory. And now on top of that, we have post-labor economy that says basically that there's going to be a huge transition, to totally new thing, right? And now we are trying to make an economic, decision like, hey, do I buy a house? With a huge mortgage that depends on so many other things. including the unknown
Mm-hmm.
unknowns, right?
Yeah.
So it's a totally different situation than, comparing to, let's say, some sort of a robotic, kind of situation where you are looking at the table and you have two widgets and you need to put them together and then, move them on to the conveyor belt, So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if even the AIs have the modeling underpinnings that are appropriate for
Well,
that.
you'll be happy to know recent reports say CEOs say AI has done nothing necessarily to jobs. So with that weird world, like they would know, but it did have a very this was another Reddit article or Reddit discussion, and it was interesting because I analyzed it. I was interested where people fell on this, and they said, well, if you could take a any topic, right, and define it pretty clearly and talk about the outputs pretty clearly, kind of sounds a little bit like a class, right? Like I have some pretty clear ideas and I'm going to try to present them and up, you can take them as you will, but hopefully it's nothing, it's nothing terribly random. He said, well, then an AI will do just fine, right? Pretty reliable. But what many people were saying is that they're just putting AI without that definition. Like most people are not good at making syllabi, right? Most people are not good at telling you what a job even is. In fact, I don't remember anyone ever telling me what my job was, right? Outside of the hiring process, which is fantasy at best, right? Like you don't get any weights or anything, you don't know anything, but that's the point. You're supposed to be malleable, right? You're supposed to
Mhm.
figure it out. And you're supposed to get help from people up above. And what I've found in every bigger company that I've been in is that there's the gatekeepers that know how this company works, which is sort of like, you know what I mean? This is very idiosyncratic info, right? Like it only matters in LA, the house prices, like you said, it only matters, like it's so hyper regional that it's not, you can't extrapolate it, right? Should I get a 6% mortgage house in LA is much different decision than should I get one in Shreveport, Louisiana or something. See what I mean? Like
Yeah.
even though the constants are the same, the cost of money is the same, perhaps, right? But everything else is different. So you just have this apples to oranges problem.
Yeah.
but but I did like this idea that most people are saying their job now is to let AI do the easy first pass stuff. Then they have to go check it, which is literally what I'm doing right now. And that's why I found this outlier got put into the story. It was one person that felt very overwhelmed by the amount of work I'm giving them. So,
Mm.
fortunately, it was only one, but I do have sensitivities, right? So I'm like, oh, wow, this is my big negative. I need to address that negative. I need to make it easier. And now we get into the fun part of what I'm talking about. Should I change something based on feedback, right? Like that's what I'm really getting at. Like, what if I went in and said, oh shoot, I have two assignments this week, and I kind of like it said do threes something, and I removed that. Like I'm just do something, right? I literally made it easier. Do you see what I mean? So the negative influenced me. And the
Mm.
question is I want to see next week, does the negative go away? Right? Or does it morph into something else? And honestly, I'm totally fucking fascinated by this idea, right? Like it's this idea that, like you just said, I mean, maybe it's all random after all, but we do tell ourselves stories and we do react to things based on negatives or failure, more so than we are confident in the things going well, which, by the way, was very high. That most people are actually, in their own words, learning this amazing topic I'm teaching, which is about fallibility of our uh, sense making. You know what I mean? Like that
Mm.
we fool ourselves most of the time, right? Which is the topic of the book too. Um,
Yeah. Well,
so
I mean,
so yeah.
in the educational environment, that's really tough, right? I mean, it's easy to discuss this, like feedback, kind of like again in manufacturing, like robotics, like you just kind of put something together, and then put it on the conveyor belt, and there is a camera looking at these two pieces, and then oh, they are off, right? So they should be put together differently, right? So there
Hmm.
is a feedback that is really in low entropy state, right? Like there is a feature
Hmm.
number one, right? Feature number one is off, right? So we go, submit that feedback, and the robot is going to maybe tighten the screws differently or something, right? In the educational environment, I mean that there is too many variables. Like for example, I grew up in an educational system where there was no evaluations, no teacher
Right.
evaluation, so
Yeah.
they could do whatever they wanted, and they oppressed, like they were very hard on us, right? And so there was classes that like in advanced math classes, the only way to pass the class was get all the lecture notes and everything kind of like by heart. But then you basically, the older students would tell you that the only way to pass this exam is that if you go to all the libraries in town, check out all the math books and get all the examples from all the math books that are kind of you can check out, right? Because there is going to be a very far beyond what was discussed. The exam is going to be far beyond what you discussed in lectures, in the classroom, right? Is that
Mm.
fair? Is that appropriate? I don't know, but basically I did the work. I mean, it cost me like 10 times more time than I anticipated. I hated the teacher's guts at that time, and then now after so many years, I think okay, that was the right thing to do, right?
Mm.
I really learned. So who was right? I mean, is the teacher who was oppressing, right? Maybe kind of like he didn't
Yeah.
explain all examples. He didn't explain all the whole domain that is going to be on the exam. So the exam was far beyond what was in the syllabus, far beyond what the lecture was, far beyond what the exercises,
Mm.
home assignments were. Was that correct or not? I don't know, but now I feel like the benefits that I had. So I mean, you tell me. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many factors that come into play, right?
Well, well, and of course, it's pretty well known since I can quote economics guys, right? This is called survivorship bias, right? Like, pardon me.
Yeah.
And it's 100% real, and it infects all of education, right? Because we learn because you're you, which is what they didn't tell you, right? You purport that it's because of your technique, right? But it's really obviously you that was able to, you know, let's just say luck out, right? Like that somehow you managed to have enough space in your head or much practice as you needed. It's like I don't know. I don't like what I don't like about that, and not that your achievement is in any way not laudable. It made you confident, right? You know, and it showed you that you could do something that was hard. But to me, that's like athletics. You know what I mean? You know, the athletics are that sooner or later all of that fades, unfortunately. Sorry, Jack. You know, it just
Yeah.
happens, right?
Yeah,
So
I
the
forgot everything. Yeah,
you've
already.
forgotten
Yeah.
everything, right? And that to me is the real problem, right? Like the lessons learned weren't, oh, I really love this subject because I really can grasp XYZ about it, right? And I can manipulate things in ways I couldn't do before, or whatever you would consider to be like a lifelong learning thing. And instead, it was more like, here is a trial by fire. You're supposed to walk across these coals, and then if you can make it up, you know, this hill, and you see what I mean? It's like sort of more of an obstacle course. And you got over it, and you got the t-shirt.
Hmm.
And I think that that has a romantic idea to many today, right? And I am so happy for LLMs because they kind of put all that out the window, right? Like the achievement part is now to understand that and the reason I read the professors stuff so much is that the fun is that it's really professors that are under the scrutiny. I think it's not students. You know, you're the ones who are saying that, hey, if you can answer these 10 questions reasonably, you know this topic or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so sorry, and Jack, all respect to your ability, but you see what I mean? Those educational systems, I think, are the ones that are the topic of our next discussion, right? Like, can education continue with this sort of test-based uh, um, I don't know, right? Like I wrote essays, and so you have to
Yeah.
write essays. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that was the
Exactly.
way I
Exactly.
proved that I knew something.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I'm thinking, shouldn't you just make TikTok reels? If you make a good TikTok reel, then you want, you're engaged in the topic and you might understand it.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
hey, if you've ever gotten a job, basically it doesn't have anything to do with your qualifications. Sorry. Right?
yeah, yeah.
And that's a sad thing, right? Because you'd think like I was top of my class at Harvard. Well, it's because you were top in what topic I don't care. You're hired. You see what I mean? Like I don't know what you learned there, but it certainly doesn't matter because I'm not able to put in enough effort to find out. And by the way, you're a friend of Bill's. So obviously you're
Yeah.
getting the job. See, and
Mm.
it's sort of what do they call it? It's like the laziest is the norm, like all these high achievements, and then the one lazy person will still succeed, but that's then the line. Oh boy, we do need to talk about it next
Well,
week, hopefully.
the discussion is a little bit more open in the research field, right? Like people are beginning to voice their opposition towards, kind of like the traditional publishing standards, where there is a committee that are guarding the gates to the
Huge
most
gates. You
prominent
all that stuff
journals.
is behind a gate. It's behind a
Yeah.
paywall.
And if something new happens that possibly could be revolutionary, the old
Yeah,
guard will filter it out and will not allow it to be published. So that is a real problem. And now, AI is beginning to kind of like score those papers. So it's a big mess. So AI is used to write the papers. AI is used to score the papers. So we are kind of maybe in a
agreed.
deep trouble. Yeah.
Well, till next week, Jack.
Yeah.
We always leave on a high note here, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Cheers.